Welcome to today's episode of The Human Angle. Happy Friday. On today's episode, we'll be discussing on critical issues currently happening in the Nigerian society in various aspects. On the show with me today to discuss on these issues is my colleague, anchor of the Economy and Politics program, Mr. Uto Abasi-Ekong. Thank you for joining us on the show today.
Thanks for having me on your show, Tayo.
It's great having you. So we've had really a lot of issues currently happening in the economy and even in our society today, from the rape issues we've been having to the COVID-19 measures, lockdown measures being subsidized. But first of all, I'd like us to discuss on the current issue by opening of worship centers. Yesterday, the Lagos State Governor, Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu, mentioned that worship centers will be reopened for mosques by June 19th and for churches by June 21st. So really, what's your reaction concerning this?
Well, you know that Lagos is the epicenter of the coronavirus with over 5,000 cases, which accounts for over 50% of totally what we're experiencing. Nigeria's current confirmed cases are 11,000 plus. That shows that whatever action is taken must be taken with extra caution.
Exactly.
So the decision to reopen churches is a gradual phase. It's not like whole church is going to reopen.
Yes.
0 to 15 years will not be allowed, and 65 years above will not be allowed. So it's that middle between 16 to 60 years grade that will be allowed to attend services. And there are conditions attached. For example, you must wear your face mask. There must be high level of sanitization in terms of using the hand sanitizers and washing of hands. And physical distancing measures must be applied. So it calls for extreme caution. You know that this has been a very serious issue that's been discussed across the country. I mean, I would even think that the governors are not being considerate in reopening churches and the mosque, place of worship. But you see, governors have a responsibility to ensure security and safety in the states. And so anything that happens, they will be held accountable first. So even in the US, you see that governors like Andrew Cuomo of New York are still looking at measures of reopening churches and places of worship like mosque in New York. So across the world, not just in Nigeria, it's an issue that has to be taken with tact, with strategy, and with every sense of adherence to guidelines, because nobody wants to find himself in a situation where people are continuing to be confirmed for the coronavirus and deaths are increasing, and the situation where the hospitals, like in Africa, where we have a fragile healthcare system and you need to treat people, and then you have so many cases of people infected, the hospitals will be filled up, capacity to attend to them will be a challenge. Already, if you notice that the first measure of easing of that lockdown started from late April into May, where food markets, you know, food is very important in terms of purchase and supply for households. Was eased in terms of who going to buy foodstuffs, and then transportation. But the Lagos State government frowned at the fact that the transportation system, the unions were not adhering to the guidelines, but the Nigerian Union of Road Transport Workers had to step up to ensure that they begin to ensure their members adhere and comply. So people have also argued that if the motor parks, the markets have been open, banks, financial services have been open, why wouldn't the churches and the place of worship open? Again, the government is looking at what I will describe, what Prime Minister Boris Johnson said. They will look at science, data, and public health. Measures have to be taken. You know, these are very sensitive center points. So the measures taken by the governor is because of safety and security. If you ask people in terms of a survey, you find out that people are extra cautious of their safety. Worship is very important, but safety is very key. Balancing that becomes very important, because citizens will begin to be asking questions about if the government is anti-religious. I don't think any governor will sit up and want to be anti-religious. They want to take measures to protect the state. There are even governors like Governor Sam Otom, who at a point said they will reopen churches and mosques and then change their minds. There are states like Katsina, Bauchi that even did that, and they are reviewing it. So in Bayelsa State, I think there were like over 6 churches that were sealed by Governor Doyediri because they did not follow the guidelines. You know, in Lagos State, they say 40% capacity. People had over 50 members in the churches in Bayelsa. They had to seal them because they found it against safety measures. So safety, is very important, security is very important, but adhering to those guidelines is critical. So if the Christian Association of Nigeria and the National Supreme Council of Islamic Affairs in Nigeria can guarantee that all their members, including the Pentecostal Fellowship of Nigeria, can guarantee that those churches will follow those guidelines, then there will be no problem. And before you do your follow-up question, the federal government also has said that if the churches don't follow these guidelines stipulated, they will be forced again to take action, and because they are being very cautious. Federal Capital Territory has issued 29 steps for reopening, and so it shows that the states and the federal government are being very cautious. So it shouldn't be taken like they don't care about the citizens, they don't care about people gathering to worship. Just to add that in the US, there's this drive-in kind of service. You drive in and you have your service, or you follow the virtual online this thing. But I know that as the measures are adhered to, and we can see a gradual reduction and not a spike, then we move to that phase of fully reopening. Because you don't want to be like a case of Brazil where President Jair Bolsonaro ignored all those protocols, and now Brazil is a hotspot of coronavirus.
Really, I would say, as you said, we had over 11,000 cases already in Lagos State. And then how visible do you think, because we have churches that are not small in number.
Yes.
I mean, we said, okay, more than 500 people can stay in the churches, there are age limits, there are rules and laws that have to be adhered to. But how visible do we think? Because there are churches that are actually over 500 people. And I know there has been advices on the fact that they can have more than one services. But even some churches are already having more than one services. Is there going to be a rule that you take an attendance of people to attend the first service or the second service? And I mean, the federal government has just recently mentioned that there might be a case of actually refraining that step of actually closing down churches, because we've had people running away from isolation centers. So how visible really can we contain the virus, and I mean in reopening, because we have large numbers in some of these churches?
I think, in Lagos State, they have set up a reopen register. Anybody that's reopening, don't forget that even in the next 2-3 weeks, we're going to see event centers, hotels, restaurants reopening, but they have to follow that reopen register templates. So when you register, they know that, okay, you're going to follow the guidelines, because the task force is there. Like in the Federal Capital Territory, they have a task force. They supervise activities. They've even arrested some clergymen, religious leaders who disobeyed the orders. I mean, there was a case in Lagos, if you remember, in Agege, where the task force went, where there were so many worshippers violating the rule, and then they tried to attack them, but I think they came back and sealed that place. So, yes, it has to be adhered to. It is a very critical issue. And for me, I believe that at this point, the bodies, the NSCIA, the CAN and PFN, will have to look at working together. There are some churches that are not members of those bodies. They also have to sit down and look at it, that safety is very important, that security is very important, and it must contribute to reducing the spike. And don't forget that the president in 2 or 3 addresses has commended the religious bodies for ensuring that members follow the guidelines. So we expect that, for example, we have big churches, like you said, the Redeemed Christian Church of God, Living Faith Church. They have massive members across the country, and even the rural areas. They will have to now innovate and look at how services should be. 1 service per day, virtual. Maybe in the rural areas, they can people that don't have access to the digital platforms, particularly in rural areas, should be given priority in attending services. But those in the cities who will have access to digital platforms can then continue to go virtual. Then there are a lot of churches, I mean, like Christ Embassy, House on the Rock, Elevation Church, who have over 80% population that are enlightened, young people and all that. They won't really have much challenges in ensuring that they operate their satellite churches, they can use viewing centers, they can go digital, they can maintain that platform. That would be very important, because nobody wants to be a cause of a spike. You can see what happened in South Korea, and they were able to contain that, tell the churches to follow the guidelines, and they have a reduced case. So it's very important. It's not like an anti-religious move, but government must also show exemplary lifestyle in terms of the fact that governors, government officials follow the guidelines themselves. It is the exemplary leadership that will also make the religious bodies to say, okay, government is very serious and is following.
So you're saying that the time right now to open churches is valid, basically?
Yeah, I mean, it has to be a phased, gradual move. It's not full reopening. For example, there were the financial centers. They had this 40-60 initially, banks were not fully open, but now they say you can fully operate in full hours and all that. So you have
but even some of the banks are taking, I'm aware that not all banks have actually opened up fully because everybody's trying to.
Even the capital market, the Nigeria Stock Exchange, the FMDQ, the NASD, affects, they are all following that business continuity plan. They're still doing their remote work, assessing the situation. So what I'm saying is that religious centers, yes, if they're going to open, they have to follow those guidelines because the state is accountable, I mean, to citizens. There are arguments that it's not fair, but the state has to continue to ensure that there's a balance between security, safety. And protection from this pandemic. Don't forget that this is not the first pandemic. In over 110 years ago, we had a pandemic which there were issues that church, schools, and all will close down. So this is not the first time we had this. It's just that there has to be measures to ensure that we're going to reopen and reopen gradually.
Also, this brings me to the second issue I'd like us to discuss about. We've had also talked about the fact that domestic flights will be happening, will be allowed to take place later on in the month, and interstate travel is still banned. How, I know there have been arguments really, the fact that why would you allow domestic flights and then interstate is not allowed? Well, what's your perspective?
I mean, globally, it's not just in Nigeria. Globally, for example, in Spain, France, South Korea, even in Malaysia and Morocco, there have been measures to first look at flights before land borders. Because land borders is a quick way. Remember that the Ebola that came to Nigeria that was contained was because Mr. Sawyer from Liberia came to to a flight. If he came to the land, it would have been a very serious issue for Nigeria. So flights can be managed in terms of safety of the airports, the planes, the measures and all that. But movements, when you reopen, people, I mean, imagine people may not even follow the guidelines inside the public transport.
The amount of people on the street.
They may not wear their face mask. If they have to wait, it's going to affect because you're wearing it for over 8 hours. Imagine traveling from Uyo to Lagos, wearing face mask. I mean, the impact. So people sneeze, cough. I mean, you will expect an explosion. So the state governors have worked together with the vice president, with the president to see that, and the Nigerian Center for Disease Control and the Federal Ministry of Health to say, let's maintain this interstate ban. I know it has an adverse impact. I mean, people can't see their families, but safety, public health first. And then for the flights, by June 21st, 5 airports will be first top priority for reopening. That's the Murtala Mohammed airports, the Abuja airports, the airport in Port Harcourt, the airport in Imo State, and of course the Aminu Kano airport in Kano. So those are 5 airports that the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority have classified, the Aviation Ministry. They will see how it continues from there. If it's effectively managed, they can begin to spread to other airports in the country. So it is very important, like they said, for all the airlines to follow the guidelines, to test all the engines, to test all the planes, and ensure that they're in good shape for the flights to reopen. Don't forget that in the US, domestic flights have started. Don't forget that in the UK, they are even saying that anybody that's coming into UK will go through a 14 days quarantine, which some people are not happy about. But these are measures. Okay, it's not just in Nigeria, but across the world, there are so much debates about how to reopen the economy. In the US, where the president himself has said, reopen this economy, and then the director of the Institute of Allergy and Diseases, Dr. Anthony Fauci, says, no, don't reopen. Safety is very important. So it's a huge debate, but safety is very important, and the approach in terms of leadership is very key. And I think we need to be working more on supporting the leaders, because this is a very difficult time to lead. If you ask any president, whether it's Jair Bolsonaro of Brazil, whether it's the president of, Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, or Prime Minister of UK, Boris Johnson, who even survived COVID-19, or even President Muhammadu Buhari, they will say that this is a very challenging time because managing pandemic plus the crude oil price crash, plus the challenges of revenue and economic recession signals. I mean, and Chancellor Angela Merkel Germany is facing a recession, the Eurozone is facing a recession. You have to maintain the economy. People have to get jobs. Even though you face a social crisis, look at the US, just a spike of George Floyd. Look at the protests. It's a very challenging time to lead.
Talking about protests, that brings me to an issue I'd like us to really address before we close from the program. There have been rising issues concerning rape, and over the course of about a week now, we've seen even more people come up and mention stories about rape, and there have been talks on how to bring in laws that can cause this not to function, or even at least limit the extent to which is. I mean, there was a case also about on Monday that happened in Ekiti State of a 17-year-old girl that was raped by about 3 street urchins. 2 of them have been caught, according to reports, but 1 is still on the lease. But really, we've also had the House Assembly, the House of Representatives, come up and say there was a vote for castration, and then it was voted for, but apparently the Speaker of the House mentioned something about if we're saying castration for a male, if a young boy was raped by an older woman, what happens then? And then the vote wasn't passed. Because really there have to be laws. We can't continue this way anymore. For me personally, I feel that the laws that have been put in place is not enough to allow men or even rapists in general have that self-consciousness not to do it. What laws do you think can be put in place concerning this to put a stop and a total stop to rape in the country?
Already in the National Assembly, there was a session where the Senate President, Ahmed Lawan, was there, and of course, motion was moved to ensure that sexual violence is dealt with. The laws are stiffer. So I'm happy that is happening already. I just want the National Assembly to take it up seriously and pass those bills that will ensure that it is stiffer. So that means that if you're caught, maybe 25, 30 years imprisonment.
So I know there was
life imprisonment. Then some states are already going ahead. States like Oshun, they're looking at a life imprisonment. In Lagos State, there's a sexual offenders court. I think states should take cue from Lagos State because that quickens the process of judgment on rape and sexual offenses. So yeah, I mean, we have to have a stiffer penalty. Stiffer in the sense that when people see that this is what has been the judgment on a rape case, then it will be a deterrent. Now, rape and murder is another case too. That could even become a life sentence, because if you look at the laws in US and in UK, they are very, very strict, stiffer penalties for rape. It may take 20 years, but when that judgment is declared, you see the impact that shows you can't run away. Some people rape and murder people and they try to change identity and all that, and they keep tracking that. So the investigation process for sexual offense, the judicial process must take a strong legislation approach. So the National Assembly has to take it very important now that the stiffer penalties must be set. State House of Assemblies must follow through and ensure that the penalties for rape and murder, rape is one case. Then when you rape and murder a lady, it's a different case. Very stiffer penalty should be meted out. And then the government, like Ekiti State, Ekiti has adopted the name and shame of perverts, people that carry out such acts. There must be that name and shame. Whoever you are in position of authority, whoever you are, there must be that name and shame, because a lot of women or men are scared because of the caliber of people that perpetrated such acts to come out to speak, because they will intimidate them that you don't even have a face, you don't have any capacity to bring me to book. And so we must learn from even the great Catholic Church, who took measures for all those men that were abused, and judgments were taken, and the compensations were made to the families, to say that even from the church, if they can correct those ills, the state has a rule, on sexual offenses. And I commend those that took that work to the police. The police has to step up too in terms of strengthening its capacity to ensure that when these cases happen, they quickly bring those people to book. And every case matters, not whether it's a high-power person or a low. They have to take every case seriously. And I believe that this whole wave, the reactions, the condemnation will lead to a much stronger approach to bringing a legal system that ensures that rapists and those who perpetrate this will think, take a second look and say, no, this is not the right approach. But if we do not make that stiffer penalty now, it will become something that will be a trend. And it's not too good for a nation because it affects productivity. Anyone that's raped, mental health is affected, productivity of the economy is affected, businesses are affected because if it's a lady or a man, it affects their ability to contribute effectively to our economy.
Talking about, we've spoken about the legislative system, and you've mentioned also about the police force. I know there was an image they put out on Twitter concerning the fact that anyone that has any report should come forward and talk. But there were responses on the fact that how effective is the police system, because people say, when they go to the police and you say they either blame them, you dressing this way, they look for scenarios around it to blame the individual. What exactly do you think can be done concerning our police force in addressing the issue? I
think we appreciate the police. They've done their best over the time to ensure that they maintain law and order and support the whole security infrastructure in the country. But what needs to be done is reorientation, equipping of staff. I think the specialized unit on sexual offense, trained for that. That's their job, that's their unit. Take on cases of rape and abuse and ensure that they follow all the traces when there's a case that comes up. Within that specialized unit, they are trained, they can even work with other police formations across the world to learn how they also tackle those cases. With that specialized unit from the Inspector General of Police, they can carry forensics, they can carry all those tests and trace and trends. You know, even in some countries, there have been cases of serial rapists. How they were caught is because they had this specialized unit of police, whether in the UK or in the US or even in Scandinavian countries like Denmark. So we need that specialized unit on sexual offense. If it's already there, they need to be strengthened in the Nigerian police force so that when cases like this, people call us so they know how they would respond quickly and swiftly. And there should be no interference in how they carry out their jobs. Anyone that is caught, no matter how connected, must be brought to book. When that happens, you see that the trend will change. But for now, if the level of compliance, the level of interventions in terms of these cases are low, and that's why we see high level of these incidents, which is unfortunate for a country like Nigeria. But once justice, for example, for Uwa Umuzua, if we can get justice for her, if we can get the culprits and get justice, and even the several others have been raped like that and killed, people would think twice and
can see what is being done about them.
Yes, they will think twice.
All right, thank you so much, Mr.
Thank you so much,
Finally, I would just like to ask on a different angle. I know we have spoken about women being raped, which is not something that, we have said no to rape. It's not something that should be condoned. It's not something that should be allowed. It's not even something that should be imagined. But we've had cases of men come up and say they have been raped as well, even from their young childhoods. I've had scenarios where people say house helps rape them when they were younger, and then it also has an effect. Could you just shed more light as a male, looking at the fact that males are being raped? What exactly do you think should be addressed, and even laws for women concerning these rape cases?
Yeah, the law has to apply too, because a lot of men have lost their self-esteem or have gone on to become predators because of that. There are two scenarios. Either they lose their self-esteem or they turn out to become predators, sexual predators, attacking women, killing women because when they grew up they were abused by whether their mom or whether their auntie or even female cousin or, the maid, like you said. So the measures have to be two ways. That's why you say you want to castrate males, how would you approach women? So the measures have to be taken two ways, because there are foundations, there are agencies, there are NGOs that are really helping to rehabilitate rape victims, victims of sexual abuse and all that. They give their stories. I watched several of 2 or 3 males who shared their story of how they were abused from childhood. Those kind of experiences are not things that people would like to share, but when they open up and share, there must be retribution, there must be steps. And I feel that people that carry such acts, my advice is that there's no need to be defensive. You should apologize and when necessary, own up to the task and face the consequence. Because when you defend, when you try to justify and
there's no justifiable reason.
No, when you try to justify or lie, like someone said the other time that it was good for Uma Nwuzua because she was dating 2 people at the same time. That's the poor justification for such an act. So those kind of actions are wrong. And for the males, it's important that then she changes that house, goes to another house, she'll do the same to other males. So it's very important that the males are given attention, like the women, not just women, but males are also going through.
Women are greater,
apart from
greater
even
number,
women
really.
too, there's this issue of men sodomizing men. I mean, young boys. Like I told you, the Catholic Church had this kind of case, but exemplary leadership from the Pope ensured that those cases were looked into, and those that perpetrated this act received the judgment in terms of court procedures, and where compensation was required, it was also done. That's very important for our time. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being with us on the program. Thank you. It was great having you and having discussions concerning these areas. And that will be all for today's edition of The Human Angle. You can send messages to us, comments on these issues we have discussed, sending emails to either news@polshareng.com or programs@polshareng.com, and let's share your experience and views. Visit our website www.polshareng.com to get more updates from our news stories and videos. You can also follow our social media platforms showing on the screen for further updates on our market reports. Till next week, thank you very much for watching and keep staying safe.